May 1, 1945. Berlin is burning. Soviet shells are falling on the Reich Chancellery. And somewhere in the chaos beneath the rubble, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany simply walks out of history. No body was ever found. No verified sighting ever confirmed. For 80 years, the question has remained: how does the head of the Gestapo just vanish? Welcome back to History of World War II. Subscribe and hit the bell. What the CIA files revealed about this man will change everything you thought you knew. Picture yourself as an Allied intelligence officer in Berlin, summer of 1945. The war in Europe is over. The Third Reich has collapsed into rubble and ash. The great Nazi leaders are either dead or in custody. Your job now is to round up the remaining wanted men, the ones who slipped through the cracks, the ones who might have escaped in the chaos of those final days. You work from a damaged building in the American sector. The windows are blown out. The electricity works only sometimes. But you have a desk, you have files, and you have a list of names. The names on your list are familiar. Göring is in custody, already giving interviews like a celebrity. Himmler is dead, suicide by cyanide after being captured. Bormann is missing, presumed dead somewhere in Berlin. Kaltenbrunner has been found and will face trial at Nuremberg. But there's one name that keeps coming up in every interrogation. One name that every captured SS officer mentions with a mixture of fear and professional respect. One name that appears in document after document seized from the wreckage of the Reich Main Security Office. Heinrich Müller, you know who he is. Head of the Gestapo since 1939. The man who ran the most feared secret police organization in history. The man who coordinated the hunt for resistance fighters across occupied Europe. The man who personally oversaw the investigation after the July 20th assassination attempt on Hitler. He was in Berlin until the very end. Multiple witnesses saw him in the Führerbunker on April 30th, the day Hitler killed himself. Others saw him on May 1st, still working, still reviewing files, still issuing orders as Soviet troops closed in. And then nothing. You search the hospitals. You search the morgues. You search the prisoner of war camps. You interrogate everyone who was in that bunker. You offer rewards for information. You follow every lead. Nothing. Heinrich Müller has vanished, and he's taken everything he knows with him. This is the story of the highest-ranking Nazi official whose fate has never been confirmed. The man who knew more secrets than almost anyone in the Third Reich. The bureaucrat who built a machine of terror, and then disappeared into the smoke of a burning city. How did he do it? Where did he go? Is he still out there somewhere, decades later, unpunished and unknown? The answers, if they exist at all, are buried in declassified files, contradictory testimonies, and 80 years of speculation. Let's start at the beginning. Heinrich Müller was born on April 28, 1900, in Munich, the capital of Bavaria. He came from a working-class Catholic family with no particular political connections. Nothing in his early life suggested the path he would eventually take. At 17, before the outbreak of the First World War, he completed an apprenticeship as an aircraft mechanic. It was practical work for a practical young man. Aviation was still in its infancy. The Wright brothers had only flown a decade earlier. But the military possibilities were becoming clear, and young men with technical skills were in demand. When Germany entered the final years of the war in 1917, Müller joined the Royal Bavarian Army. He served in the Luftstreitfreight, the Imperial German Air Service, working as a pilot for an artillery spotting unit. His job was to fly over enemy lines, observe troop positions and artillery emplacements, and report back to German gunners on the ground. Flying over the Western Front in those final months of the war was extremely dangerous work. The aircraft were fragile by later standards, made of wood and canvas, vulnerable to both enemy fire and mechanical failure. Anti-aircraft guns were becoming more accurate. Allied fighters prowled the skies looking for easy targets. Many spotting pilots never returned from their missions. Müller survived. More than that, he distinguished himself. He received several military decorations for bravery during this period, including the Iron Cross, whatever else he would become in later years. The young Heinrich Müller demonstrated physical courage under fire. Then came defeat. Germany surrendered in November 1918. The Kaiser fled. Revolution swept the country. And for young men like Heinrich Müller, the world they had known simply collapsed. Bavaria was one of the most politically unstable regions in post-war Germany. Left-wing uprisings in Munich created a brief Bavarian Soviet Republic in the spring of 1919. Street fighting raged between revolutionary forces and right-wing paramilitaries. The old order was fighting for survival against forces that wanted to remake Germany entirely. Müller joined the Munich police during this chaotic period. He was assigned to the political branch, the section responsible for monitoring extremist groups of all kinds. His job was to watch, to report, to understand who posed a threat to the state. He was good at it. His superiors noted certain qualities. His reports were clear and structured. He followed orders without hesitation. He showed no personal sympathy for any political faction. He was not a communist. He was not a Nazi. He was not anything in particular. He was a policeman, a professional, a man who did his job well and kept his opinions to himself. These qualities helped him advance. If this is changing how you see this story, hit that like button. By the early Müller was firmly established in the Bavarian State Police. His daily work involved monitoring political groups across Munich. This included early contact with the Nazi Party during its formative years. Müller was present during the aftermath of the Beer Hall Putsch in November 1923. This was Adolf Hitler's first attempt to seize power, a chaotic and ultimately failed uprising that ended with police gunfire and Hitler's arrest. Müller watched it unfold. He helped process the aftermath. But his reports from this period show no personal sympathy for Hitler or his movement. He was anti-communist. That much is clear from his record. He had spent years monitoring left-wing groups and participating in actions against them. But he kept a professional distance from all political movements. He was a civil servant, not a true believer. Throughout the late Yrs. Müller's career in the political police deepened. He specialized in surveillance, interrogation, and the analysis of political threats. He developed expertise in filing systems and document management. He understood how to cross-reference information, how to build cases from fragments of intelligence, how to maintain strict control over sensitive material. These were the skills that would eventually make him indispensable to far more dangerous masters. The turning point came in January 1933. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Within weeks, the Nazi regime began consolidating power. Political opponents were arrested. Civil liberties were suspended. The machinery of dictatorship began to take shape. In Prussia, Hermann Göring reorganized the state police and created a new political force, the Geheime Staatspolizei, the secret state police, the Gestapo. Müller was recruited because of his experience in Munich and his strong record against communist groups. He moved to Berlin and joined the organization during its earliest phase. His precise reporting style and his ability to manage large intelligence files quickly made him stand out among officers who were often more ideologically committed but less administratively competent. By the mid-Joshua-Ling-s, Müller had caught the attention of Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich was one of the most dangerous men in Nazi Germany. Tall, blonde, and coldly ambitious, he was building the Sicherheitsdienst, the intelligence arm of the SS. He was also accumulating power within the security apparatus at extraordinary speed. Heydrich valued Müller's methodical approach. He recognized that ideology was less important than efficiency when it came to running a secret police force. Müller joined the SS in 1934. He rose steadily through the ranks. By 1938, he had earned a reputation as one of the most capable administrators in the German political police. But there was always something that set Müller apart from the true believers around him. He never displayed the fanatical commitment that characterized men like Heydrich or Himmler. He was a technician, a bureaucrat, a man who built systems and managed information. His colleagues sometimes wondered what he actually believed in, if anything at all. This pragmatic detachment made some leaders distrust him. But his efficiency made him indispensable. Stay until the end. The mystery of what happened to this man remains unsolved to this day. When World War II erupted in September 1939, Müller became one of the most powerful officials in Nazi Germany's security system. That year, he was appointed head of AMT for the division of the Reich Main Security Office responsible for the Gestapo. The RSHA combined intelligence, policing, and administrative oversight into one massive structure. It was the nervous system of Nazi terror, coordinating everything from the suppression of resistance movements to the logistics of mass murder. The organization chart-placed Müller near the top of the most feared bureaucracy in Europe. From the RSHA headquarters in Berlin, a sprawling complex of buildings on Prinz-Albrecht-Straße, Müller coordinated the daily work of thousands of officers spread across the Greater German Reich and all occupied territories. His responsibilities were staggering in scope. He reviewed intelligence reports from across Europe. He directed investigations into suspected enemies of the state. He maintained communication with field offices in Paris, Warsaw, Prague, Amsterdam, Brussels, and dozens of other cities. He received information from the Abwehr, the military intelligence service. He coordinated with the Sicherheitsdienst, the SS intelligence branch. He maintained contacts with police agencies in allied and satellite countries. Every thread of the Nazi security apparatus eventually ran through his office. His command of information made him central to the regime's internal security operations. In a system built on secrecy and mutual suspicion, Müller knew more than almost anyone else. He knew which officers were reliable and which were suspect. He knew which operations had succeeded and which had failed. He knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. As the war expanded, so did his power. He oversaw investigations into opposition networks and resistance groups. He coordinated the hunt for individuals considered threats by the Nazi leadership. He monitored occupied territories. He reviewed intelligence from across the continent. Müller was deeply involved in the machinery of repression inside Germany. Anyone accused of treason or espionage eventually came to his attention. His files contained the names of thousands of people who had been arrested, interrogated, tortured, or killed. Relations within the security apparatus were often tense. Müller respected Heydrich, who had recognized his talents and promoted his career. But he frequently clashed with Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. Himmler preferred loyalty and ideological commitment. Müller offered bureaucratic strictness and administrative efficiency. It wasn't a natural fit, but Müller's usefulness kept him in power. After Heydrich was assassinated in Prague in June 1942, Müller worked under Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the new head of the RSHA. The relationship was professional, but never close. One of Müller's most visible roles came after the July 20, 1944 assassination attempt on Hitler. When officers led by Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg tried to kill the Führer at the Wolfslayer headquarters in East Prussia, Müller was tasked with identifying and tracking down the conspirators. The bomb had detonated. Hitler had survived with minor injuries, and now the regime wanted blood. Müller's response was swift and systematic. His office coordinated interrogations across Germany. His men conducted arrests in Berlin, Paris, Vienna, and military headquarters throughout the Reich. His analysts combed through files, looking for connections between known conspirators and potential sympathizers. The investigation revealed a network far larger than anyone had initially suspected. Military officers, diplomats, civil servants, aristocrats, clergy, the conspiracy had reached into nearly every institution of the German state. Within weeks, thousands of people had been arrested. Some were directly involved in the plot. Others were merely suspected of having known about it. Still others were swept up simply because they had connections to someone who was connected to someone who might have been involved. Müller's reports contributed to the rapid collapse of the resistance network. His methods were thorough. His interrogators were skilled at extracting information. One confession led to another name, which led to another arrest, which led to another confession. Hundreds would eventually be executed. Many more would spend the remainder of the war in concentration camps. The conspiracy was crushed with systematic brutality, and Müller was at the center of that crushing. His control over information made him one of the most informed men in Nazi Germany. He knew names, he knew networks. He knew secrets that could destroy careers, compromise operations, or expose crimes that the regime preferred to keep hidden. This knowledge would become increasingly dangerous as the war turned against Germany. By early 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Allied forces were closing in from the west. Soviet armies were advancing from the east. Cities were being reduced to rubble. The Nazi leadership was fragmenting. But Müller remained at his post. As Berlin braced for the final Soviet assault, Müller continued to direct his department from within the capital. While others fled or prepared escape routes, he stayed near the center of power. In mid-April 1945, he moved into the Führerbunker complex beneath the Reich Chancellery. This underground shelter, buried beneath layers of concrete, was Hitler's final headquarters. A claustrophobic maze of corridors and small rooms where the remnants of the Nazi leadership gathered to await the end. Müller worked from the smaller administrative rooms off the main corridor. His role in the bunker focused on internal security, intelligence updates, and the protection of sensitive records. Every morning, he reviewed intercepted communications, troop reports, and the status of Berlin's defenses. Hitler's secretary, Total Vanish, later recalled seeing Müller on April 22. She noted that he had effectively taken over some of Arndt's, Kaltenbrunner's duties as head of the RSHA since Kaltenbrunner had left Berlin. Bunker telephone operator Rohus Misch also remembered seeing Müller. Both witnesses placed him in the bunker on April 30, the day Hitler took his own life. During these final days, Müller had frequent contact with Wilhelm Mohnke, who served as the bunker's military commander. He interacted with Martin Bormann, who relied on him for security assessments. According to post-war testimonies, Müller briefed Joseph Goebbels on the state of resistance groups, concerned that opposition networks might try to exploit the chaos. Several bunker survivors later mentioned Müller's almost detached demeanor during these final days. He kept his uniform neat. He maintained a strict office routine. He carried folders between meetings as if the government were still functioning normally. His authority came not from rank, but from the vast amount of information he controlled. In a system built on secrecy, Müller understood the scale of what he knew. He understood the danger it posed. If he fell into Allied hands, he would be interrogated. He would be forced to reveal names, networks, operations. Everything he knew about the inner workings of the Nazi security state would be extracted from him. For a man like Müller, this knowledge was both his greatest asset and his greatest liability. One of his last documented tasks was the interrogation of Hermann Fegelein. Fegelein was Himmler's SS liaison officer and was married to Eva Braun's sister. When news emerged that Himmler had been trying to negotiate secretly with the Western Allies, Fegelein was arrested. Müller personally questioned him in a cellar near the bunker. Fegelein was later shot after Hitler stripped Himmler of all his posts. The episode demonstrated how deeply involved Müller remained in internal security, even as the regime crumbled around him. The last reliable sighting of Heinrich Müller occurred on May 1, 1945. Witnesses placed him still inside the bunker complex that afternoon. The situation above ground was desperate. Soviet troops had reached the Reich Chancellery. Fighting was occurring in the gardens just meters from the bunker entrances. The sound of artillery and small arms fire was constant. Inside the bunker, the remaining staff were making decisions about their own survival. Some chose to stay and face capture. Some chose to attempt breakouts through the Soviet lines. Some chose death. Müller's movements after May 1st are unknown. Some witnesses stated he left toward the Reich Chancellery Gardens, possibly attempting to escape through the chaos of the final battle. Others claimed he moved into an adjacent shelter, perhaps seeking a safer location to wait out the fighting. A few suggested he went to inspect bodies near one of the exits, possibly trying to confirm the deaths of people whose fates concerned him. These statements contradict each other. None can be verified. No confirmed document places Müller outside the bunker after May 1st. In a place where dozens of senior figures died, surrendered, or escaped in those final hours, Heinrich Müller simply vanished. He left no note. He gave no final orders that survive in the record. He made no arrangements that anyone has been able to trace. The head of the Gestapo walked out of the bunker and into history. And no one knows what happened next. When the war ended in May 1945, Allied intelligence agencies expected Heinrich Müller to be among the top Nazi officials brought into custody. As head of the Gestapo, he possessed knowledge of internal security operations, foreign intelligence contacts, and the regime's most sensitive files. He knew the names of informants across occupied Europe. He knew the details of operations against resistance networks. He knew secrets that could compromise ongoing intelligence work. He was a prime target for interrogation. Yet he was not found among the prisoners taken in Berlin. His name did not appear on any Soviet list of captured personnel. No body matching his description was identified among the thousands of dead scattered across the ruined city. The absence was noticed immediately. This was not some minor functionary. This was the head of the Gestapo. Finding him was a priority. Within weeks, both the U.S. counterintelligence corps and the Soviet NKVD launched independent searches. Both organizations had strong reasons to want Müller in their custody. For the Americans, his knowledge of Nazi security operations would be invaluable. For the Soviets, his expertise in anti-communist activities would be equally useful. Neither side wanted the other to get him first. Early leads pointed in several directions. In the summer of 1945, some German prisoners told American investigators that Müller had been seen dead near the Reich Chancellery. Others insisted he had been taken by Soviet troops. American officers searched hospitals, morgues, and detention centers across Berlin. They found nothing. The search was complicated by an absurd but genuine problem. Heinrich Müller was an extremely common name in Germany. There were thousands of Heinrich Müllers. There were even 2 SS generals named Heinrich Müller. Sorting through the confusion took months. The Soviets offered no clear information. They claimed Müller was not in their custody. But Western agencies doubted this. If anyone had a reason to capture Müller and keep him hidden, it was the Soviets. His knowledge of anti-communist operations would have been invaluable. As the Cold War began, the search became more complicated. By the early 1950s, many American and British officials quietly assumed Müller was dead. But his name continued to appear in war crimes files. Investigators working on other cases kept stumbling across references to him. The file remained open. Then the rumors started. Former SS officer Walter Schellenberg, who had headed the foreign intelligence branch of the SD, claimed that Müller had defected to the Soviet Union. Schellenberg said Müller had been seen in Moscow in 1948, but he offered no verifiable details. During the 1960s, new stories surfaced. The capture of Adolf Eichmann in Argentina in 1960 renewed worldwide interest in escaped Nazis. Israeli agents had tracked Eichmann to Buenos Aires, kidnapped him, and brought him to Jerusalem to stand trial. The operation demonstrated that Nazi war criminals could be found and brought to justice even 15 years after the war. Eichmann, who had worked directly under Müller organizing deportations, was interrogated extensively. His Israeli questioners asked about many subjects, including the fate of his former boss. Eichmann told his interrogators that he believed Müller was still alive. He couldn't say where. He had no specific information. but he was convinced that his former superior had survived. In 1961, a Polish defector named Michael Galanewski reported that Soviet superiors had told him Müller had been picked up and taken to Moscow around 1950 or 9952. American investigators pursued the lead but could not confirm the story. West German authorities also investigated more concrete possibilities. They looked into reports that Müller's body had been found and buried shortly after the fall of Berlin. If he had died in the fighting, there might be a grave somewhere with his remains. One account came from a man named Walter Lüders, who claimed he had helped bury an SS General's body, along with papers identifying the deceased as Heinrich Müller. According to Lüders, the burial had taken place in the chaos of early May 1945, when bodies were being disposed of hastily throughout the city. The grave was supposedly located at the old Jewish cemetery on Gross-Hamburger Strasse in Berlin. The location was grimly ironic. The head of the Gestapo, the organization that had played such a central role in the persecution of Jews, might be buried in a Jewish cemetery. In 1963, German authorities decided to investigate. A grave at that site was exhumed. Workers carefully removed the earth, searching for remains that might match what was known about Müller's physical characteristics. What they found was inconclusive. The remains discovered there were mixed. Multiple bodies had been buried together in the confusion of those final days. Skeletal fragments, bits of uniform, personal items, all jumbled together. Some bones appeared to belong to multiple individuals. Positive identification of any single person was impossible. The grave provided no answers. Later claims placed Müller in cities across the world: Czechoslovakia, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, even Panama. In Panama, a man named Francis Willard Keith was briefly suspected of being Müller, living under a false identity. The theory fell apart when fingerprint evidence cleared him. None of the leads ever produced a confirmed sighting of Heinrich Müller alive. None of the searches ever found a body that could be definitively identified as belonging to him. In 2001, the United States released the CIA's Müller file under the Freedom of Information Act. The documents revealed that American intelligence agencies had searched for Müller for years. The investigation was extensive. Officers had followed leads across multiple continents. They had interrogated dozens of witnesses. They had combed through captured German records. The conclusion was remarkable for what it didn't say. The CIA and its predecessor organizations had never made contact with Müller after the war. Despite all the rumors about him working for one side or another, there was no evidence that any Western intelligence agency had ever employed him or even spoken with him. The report noted that there were strong indications, but no proof that Müller had died in Berlin during the final battle. It also noted that there were equally strong indications, but no proof that he might have been captured and used by Soviet intelligence. Both possibilities remained open. Neither could be confirmed. What does the disappearance of Heinrich Müller mean? Perhaps it's about the chaos of those final days. Berlin in May 1945 was a city of the dead. Tens of thousands of corpses lay in the streets, in the rubble, in the canals. Identification was often impossible. Bodies were buried in mass graves without records. In that environment, one more dead man among thousands could easily go unnoticed. Perhaps it's about the value of what he knew. Müller possessed information that would have been valuable to any intelligence service: the names of agents, the details of operations, the secrets of the Nazi security state. If he survived, he had bargaining chips. He could offer his knowledge in exchange for protection. Perhaps it's about the limits of historical investigation. Some mysteries simply cannot be solved. Evidence is lost. Witnesses die. Records are destroyed or remain classified. Sometimes the truth disappears with the people who knew it. Or perhaps it's simpler than any of that. Heinrich Müller was a man who spent his entire career controlling information. He understood better than almost anyone how knowledge could be used, hidden, or destroyed. He understood how to disappear. If anyone in the Nazi hierarchy had the skills to vanish successfully, it was the head of the Gestapo. The mystery of Heinrich Müller has persisted for 80 years. Every few decades, new theories emerge. Researchers claim breakthroughs. Journalists announce discoveries. And then the trail goes cold again. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, also vanished from the bunker in May 1945. For decades, his fate was equally mysterious. Then, in 1972, construction workers found remains in Berlin that were later positively identified as Bormann through DNA testing. The mystery was solved. No such resolution has ever come for Müller. His file remains one of the great unsolved cases of the entire Nazi era. A man who commanded the Gestapo for 6 years. A man who was present in Hitler's bunker until the very end. A man who knew more secrets than almost anyone else in the Third Reich. And then nothing. No confirmed death. No confirmed escape. No confirmed grave. No confirmed sighting. Just complete silence. Heinrich Müller built a career on surveillance, control, and the systematic collection of information about others. In the end, he took all of his own information with him. The hunter became invisible. The man who knew where everyone else was hiding has never been found. His disappearance stands as a final, unsettling reminder that even the most documented regime in history still has secrets. That even after decades of investigation, some questions remain unanswered. That some men take their mysteries to graves that no one has ever located. The head of the Nazi Gestapo vanished into the ruins of Berlin in May 1945. 80 years later, we still don't know what happened to him. Maybe we never will. If this changed how you see history, watch what happened to the Luftwaffe after WWII next. Same untold story, same hidden history. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Thanks for watching History of World War II.